Did you hear they replaced the snack fridge with a wellness station stocked with chia seeds, almond water, and kombucha? The air in the office felt like it was thick with bureaucracy, Sarah muttered, her voice bouncing off the pristine glass walls of her office, as if it were a whisper caught in a mausoleum. No one responded. Not because they didn't hear her, but because no one talked anymore. At least not without scheduling it in advance through Outlook, calling it a collaboration sync. It was a strange ritual, something she'd come to expect. From the chaos of the new corporate world. 15 years, that's how long Sarah had been the backbone of Innovate Solutions. Not just a cog in the machine, but the bones and tendons of the very structure that kept the company from toppling. When the 2009 crash happened, when the CEO had a breakdown in 2013, when the 2016 rebrand turned their logo into a blue gradient mess, she had been there. She had kept things together. Now, she sat in what looked like a sterile spa prison hybrid focus pods, sound-dampening walls and all. With the lighting so dim it felt almost oppressive. The merger had officially closed last Tuesday, and OmniCorp had absorbed Innovate Solutions like a python swallowing a hamster, slow, suffocating, inevitable. There had been cupcakes. Of course, dry and overly frosted, like they were a corporate formality, tasteless and hollow. They had speeches too, all those executives from OmniCorp, going on about unlocking potential, harmonizing verticals, synergy, words designed to sound like the future was being built. But Sarah knew better. This wasn't a merger. It was a gutting. A purge, disguised as a celebration. She had clapped politely, but deep down, she felt the pit in her stomach grow. As they prattled on, she knew a hit job when she heard one. The morning had started innocently enough, with a fresh-faced junior who probably thought he was doing something groundbreaking. He knocked on her glass, uninvited. He had the kind of face that had never known a mistake or a bad haircut. "Hey, Sarah, right?" he asked, stepping in before she could even say yes. "I'm the senior project manager for the infrastructure and platform migration," he added, all too eager. "Do you, still use Jenkins? We're thinking about consolidating into Azure for continuity." Sarah blinked, her tone deadpan. "Do I still use Jenkins?" she repeated, as though the words were a prayer to some demon she'd rather not summon. "Yeah, we're just evaluating redundancies and eliminating friction." He went on, oblivious to her gaze, the smile on his face like it had been force-fed by some corporate playbook. Friction, she thought. She echoed the word, just for the amusement of it, and he bounced out, leaving behind only the faint scent of overpriced optimism. She turned back to her dual monitors. 2 weeks ago, she had been overseeing a multi-million-dollar cross-platform deployment. Today, she was reading a PDF titled OmniCorp Integration Policy, Final Version. The document felt like a silent death. Its legalese washed over her, all those clauses. One in particular stood out: all employment agreements previously governed by Innovate Solutions shall be deemed null and void upon completion of the merger and replaced by OmniCorp's standard at-will employment policies. Effective immediately. Sarah exhaled slowly. There it was, the quiet annihilation of everything she had built. The fine print erasing her career as though it never existed. Her phone buzzed. A calendar invite from Change Management appeared. 50 minutes. No agenda listed. A feeling of doom, slow and creeping, settled into her bones. She glanced across the office at the Innovate Solutions team, the old guard, the ones who used to laugh after product launches, who used to share memes during deployment weekends. Now, they sat stiff and silent, their screens glowing like pale tombstones. Across from them, the OmniCorp people walked as if they already owned the place, heads held high, ignoring the ghosts of Innovate's past. No eye contact. No need for pleasantries. Her eyes flickered to the bottom drawer of her desk. She opened it slowly. There it was, the leather-bound folio Dave had given her 13 years ago. It was embossed with gold, a relic of a different time. She hadn't thought of it in years. Dave had handed it to her with that goofy grin of his, telling her, "You're one of the originals." He'd added a clause in the contract, something about being covered if anything ever happened to the company. Something weird but reassuring. She had shoved it into a drawer and forgotten about it, until now. She stared at the folio. It had remained untouched, like an untouched relic, until this very moment. The words in the contract echoed in her mind as she read the PDF again. Faster now. All employment agreements, null and void, ... She knew that the worst was yet to come. Her phone buzzed again, another calendar invite. This one from Change Management. 10 minutes. Sarah sighed. It was all happening, and she wasn't even sure where the floor had gone beneath her feet. All she had was a document that felt like a legal loophole, a line of defense in a game where she didn't even know the rules anymore. As she reached for the leather folio, her thoughts drifted to the past, to the late nights coding in a garage filled with ambition and burnt pizza. She had been the spine of Innovate Solutions. She had kept the company afloat when everything seemed to collapse. Now, it was all slipping through her fingers. The next ping from her phone interrupted her thoughts. 50 minutes. Change management. No agenda. She closed the folio slowly, her fingers tracing the embossed gold lettering, as though the weight of it was anchoring her in a way the sterile office couldn't. A new chapter was about to begin, and Sarah was going to make sure it wasn't written for her. Not this time. Sarah stood up from her chair slowly, a wave of resignation washing over her. It wasn't fear, she wasn't afraid anymore. What she felt now was something colder, something far more calculated. She wasn't sure whether it was anger or something else entirely, but it was real, and it was rising inside her like a slow burn. She moved through the office, her footsteps echoing on the plush carpet, the kind that felt like it was made to suffocate ambition rather than support it. As she passed the empty desks, where Innovate Solutions team used to sit, she caught the ghostly stares of her former colleagues. Their faces were locked in the same trance they'd been in for the past few days. They weren't thinking about the work anymore. They were just going through motions, hoping it would end. But Sarah wasn't like them. She couldn't afford to be. She arrived at the conference room a few minutes early. It was the same room where she'd hosted countless meetings over the years, but now it felt different. The air was thick with a sense of finality, like it had been tainted with a permanent shadow. The sleek OmniCorp executives were already milling around, whispering to each other, as if preparing for some kind of high-stakes drama. Sarah didn't care. She wasn't there to listen to their hollow speeches or pretend she was still part of something. Her eyes scanned the room until they landed on Nathaniel, the man who had led the merger speeches with so much practiced enthusiasm. He was standing at the front, deep in conversation with a couple of the new executives from OmniCorp. She saw the way he smiled at them, like he thought he was some corporate hero. They didn't know. Not a single one of them knew what was coming. When the meeting finally began, the room was eerily silent. Nathaniel stood at the front, his voice a practiced blend of corporate jargon. He spoke about transformation, about synergy, and about building a future together. He spoke about leveraging our assets and aligning our cultures. But Sarah wasn't listening. She had already tuned him out, focusing instead on the tiny detail that had remained etched in her mind since that morning. Her contract, the one that she had forgotten about until the very moment they tried to erase her. She felt the weight of it in her bag, the leather still smooth under her fingers, a reminder that everything they were doing to her was wrong. They thought they could break her. They thought they could just swap her out, like she was a cog in the machine, replaceable. But they didn't know. No one had bothered to read the contract she had signed, the one that guaranteed her something they would never understand, her worth. The meeting dragged on, but Sarah barely noticed. She kept staring at the folder, her thoughts racing. When Nathaniel finally finished, he clapped his hands together, a hollow sound in the sterile air. He spoke to the room like a motivational speaker trying to rally the troops for a cause no one cared about. He spoke about the future, about success, and how Innovate Solutions was now a part of OmniCorp's global vision. His words sounded like nails scraping down a chalkboard to Sarah. She was done listening. The meeting ended, and Sarah made her way back to her desk, her mind clear and focused. She could hear whispers from the newer OmniCorp employees, but they didn't matter. Their opinions were as empty as their smiles. As she sat back down in her chair, she opened the folio again, letting the heavy pages fall open to the section that had been etched into her mind. Ever since that morning, Section 9. Change of control provision. It was a clause she had never thought she would need. But as she read through the language again, it felt like a promise that had been made to her all those years ago. She hadn't known it then, but it was her safety net, her shield. And now, it was the thing that would bring everything crashing down around them. Her hands were steady as she clicked through her email, opening the one that had arrived just moments ago. Policy update. OmniCorp Employment Handbook, V7.1. It was their final move, their attempt to erase her. She clicked on the attachment, her fingers moving over the trackpad as though she had done this 1,000 times before. The document was long, filled with pages of corporate nonsense, but one line stood out, clear and sharp. All previous employment, agreements, contracts, and incentive plans shall be deemed void as of the acquisition date. Employment is now governed by the OmniCorp standard at-will policies. It was the same language she had seen in the PDF earlier. The same words that had washed over her like a tidal wave, and it was the same mistake. They thought they could just undo everything. They thought they could sweep her under the rug. But they hadn't read. Section 9. They hadn't read her contract. The email pinged again. Another calendar invite. She checked the time 50 minutes. No agenda. No context. The same as the last one. But this time, Sarah didn't hesitate. She stood up, grabbed her leather folio, and headed for the door. She wasn't waiting for permission anymore. She wasn't going to sit through another pointless meeting or pretend. She was going to get her severance in a nicely packaged envelope. They had already made their move, and now it was her turn. She passed by the break room, where a new touchscreen coffee machine replaced her old, reliable coffee maker. The people she passed didn't look up. She didn't expect them to. The life had been sucked out of this place. The heart of Innovate Solutions had been gutted, and now it was just a hollow shell. Her mind raced as she made her way to the elevator, her fingers gripping the leather folio. They had thought they had it all figured out, that they could erase everything she had built. But they hadn't seen what she was holding in her hands. She was done being erased. And now, she was going to make them pay. The hum of the building now a background noise to the thumping of her heart. She wasn't nervous. No, this wasn't about fear. It was about something else, something far sharper, far more deliberate. She walked down the corridor, her footsteps echoing in the empty space. Her phone buzzed again, another email, another calendar invite, but she ignored it. She had bigger things to focus on. As she passed the empty desks and the new employees that had come in, replacing the ones who had once been her colleagues, her old friends, she felt nothing, not anger, not resentment, just clarity. They were in the process of erasing her, but she wouldn't let them. They hadn't seen her coming, and now they never would. The office felt like a maze. The once familiar corridors now transformed into sterile, lifeless hallways. The posters on the walls, the motivational quotes about innovation and teamwork, all of it had been replaced with the cold, corporate speak of one Omni, one future. It was a lie, Sarah knew. There was no one future. There was just the future they wanted to control, to homogenize, to stamp out anything that didn't fit. She arrived at the conference room, the door, a glass pane that now looked out onto the empty office, the same way she felt separated, boxed in. A part of something that was never really hers anymore. She stepped inside, the cold air of the room sending a shiver down her spine. Randall Pierce, the VP of Operational Realignment, was already seated at the table, his hands folded neatly in front of him. He didn't stand to greet her, didn't even look up. Next to him, a woman from HR sat, her fake smile plastered across her face. The type of smile that Sarah had come to loathe over the past few days, the type of smile that pretended everything was fine when it clearly wasn't. Sarah Monroe, Randall said, his voice as flat as the meeting room. I'm sure you're aware of why you're here. She sat down without waiting to be invited, the leather folio placed neatly in front of her, like a weapon on display. The woman from HR didn't speak, but her eyes flickered nervously between Sarah and Randall. She wasn't sure if she was scared of Sarah or what was coming next. Randall cleared his throat. We've been reviewing the integration process, and I know why I'm here. Sarah interrupted, her voice calm, controlled. You're here to fire me, just like the others. What you don't realize is, I'm not like the others. Randall's jaw tightened. The HR woman shifted uncomfortably in her chair. Sarah, Randall began, his voice laced with condescension. This is an unfortunate situation, but we have to make these tough decisions for the good of the company. The company? Sarah echoed, her voice flat. The company you're about to destroy. You think firing me is going to help? You think any of us will buy this charade you're trying to sell? The words hung in the air between them, the tension palpable. The HR woman glanced at Randall, unsure of how to proceed. But Randall, ever the corporate puppet, pressed on. Your position has been evaluated as redundant, he said, sliding a folder toward her. The decision was made in consultation with senior management and the integration team. Sarah didn't touch the folder. She didn't need to. She knew what it contained, what they all thought was a legal formality. What they didn't know was that she wasn't going to sign it. Not today, not ever. Redundant, Sarah said, shaking her head slowly. Funny, I've never been redundant to Innovate Solutions. I've been the lifeblood of this company for the past 15 years. I built the infrastructure, I designed the processes, I brought in the clients, and I kept things running when no one else could. And now, you want to fire me, like I'm just another cog in the machine. The HR woman finally spoke up, her voice wavering. We understand that this is difficult, but nothing, Sarah snapped, leaning forward. You're not firing me. You're trying to erase me. But you can't, because I've got something you don't. I've got my contract, and you missed something important. Randall's eyes narrowed. What are you talking about? Sarah didn't answer. She opened the leather folio, her fingers brushing over the pages until she found what she was looking for. She slid it across the table, toward Randall, watching as his eyes flicked over the words, his expression changing from one of indifference to one of confusion. You see, Sarah said, her tone calm now, almost smug, this contract is more than just paper. It's a promise. A promise that if Innovate Solutions ever gets acquired or merged, I would be entitled to accelerated vesting of my equity, a performance bonus, and, most importantly, a payout if I'm terminated without cause within 12 months of said acquisition. Randall stared at the document, his face going pale. The HR woman leaned forward, eyes wide. This is a mistake. This can't be valid. It's just a clause in an old contract. Sarah smiled, a smile that didn't reach her eyes. It's not just a clause, it's my safety net. And now, it's yours too. You're about to learn just how much you've missed. The silence in the room was thick, heavy, like the air before a storm. Randall opened his mouth to say something, but the words caught in his throat. He looked at the HR woman, who could only stare at the contract with a growing sense of dread. I'll be taking that payout, Sarah said softly, her gaze fixed on Randall. And if you don't honor it, well, I'm afraid we'll have a much bigger problem on our hands. The HR woman glanced nervously at Randall, who swallowed hard. We can't. You can, Sarah interrupted. You can, because you don't have a choice. You're going to pay me what I'm owed, or you're going to face a breach of contract lawsuit that'll make your board wish they'd never heard my name. The HR woman visibly recoiled. You can't be serious. Sarah stood up slowly, her posture calm, collected. I'm very serious. This is what happens when you think you can erase someone who's been here from the beginning. I'm not just some cog in the machine. I am the machine. She turned and walked toward the door, her steps firm. Get the paperwork together. I'm not coming back, and you're not going to get away with this. As the door clicked shut behind her, Sarah felt something shift inside her. She wasn't the victim. She wasn't the one who had been wronged anymore. She had just become the one who would make them pay.